To begin your Unit 5 dissection of the white rat, we will begin by examining the external anatomy. Here you can observe the rat's general body shape, including the elongate tapering head, thick neck, heavy body, and long scaly tail with scales made of keratin. The rat has 4 limbs. All are short, but the hind limbs are longer than the forelimbs. Whiskers project laterally from the snout. Most of the rest of the body is covered with short fur. The mouth is located at the anterior end of the animal and contains its elongated lower lip and contains its teeth. The external nares or nostrils are located just above. The external ear or pinna is paired and is located dorsally. By observing the ventral view of the animal, we can determine the sex of the rat. The anus is located below the base of the tail in each sex. In the male, the scrotum containing the testes is located just anterior to the anus. Just anterior to the scrotum is the opening of the male urogenital system, terminating in the penis. It is usually withdrawn into a skin covering and can be observed more fully in the internal dissection in Unit 8. The female has 3 openings: the anus, the vagina in front of the anus, and the urinary opening. They can be differentiated here. In order to investigate the oral cavity of your rat, we will open its mouth. Using heavy scissors, we cut into the corners of the mouth. Cutting through the cheek muscles on either side while forcing the mouth open. Now that we've opened the rat's mouth and exposed the oral cavity, we can examine the structures within. First, the muscular tongue is attached to the floor of the mouth cavity. The roof of the mouth is formed by an anterior hard palate and a posterior soft palate. Here we can also see the long incisors, the continuously growing front teeth of the rat. The most posterior part of the oral cavity is the pharynx. Located above the soft palate is the nasopharynx, the passageway that connects the pharynx with the nasal cavities. Also, in the mouth cavity, we can see the glottis, the opening into the larynx and trachea. The opening is covered by a triangular flap of tissue, the epiglottis. Behind and dorsal to the glottis is the opening into the esophagus. To continue our dissection of our rat and expose the neck region, we need to cut the muscles of the neck. Now that we have exposed the neck region in your rat, we can see just under the connective tissue under the skin the most conspicuous pair of salivary glands, the submaxillary salivary glands, one of 3 pairs. Just dorsal to the submaxillary salivary glands, we can see the ventral view of the trachea. At the anterior end of the trachea, we can see a small light-colored H-shaped thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is part of the endocrine system, which you will explore in Unit 7. Dorsal to the trachea is the much smaller, thin-walled esophagus. To expose the abdominal cavity and the organs and structures that lie within it, we will now make a midline incision on the ventral surface of the rat, cutting through both the skin and muscle that cover it. The cut will extend anteriorly to the rib cage. Now that we have exposed the abdominal cavity of your rat, we can see the largest and most conspicuous organ in the body, the liver. The liver is composed of 4 lobes, 3 of which we can see in this view. Just dorsal to the liver, we can see the rat's curved muscular stomach. Entering the stomach, we can see the continuation of the esophagus, extending from the neck region to where it enters the stomach. Following the stomach posteriorly, we see a constriction. That is called the pylorus and is the junction between the stomach and the small intestine. The first segment of the small intestine is known as the duodenum. Located within the first loop of the small intestine, beneath the stomach, is the pancreas. The pancreas is a diffuse gland that lies within the mesentery between the stomach and the intestine. The small intestine continues posteriorly through the abdominal cavity, where it joins the large intestine, which is a larger diameter tube. At the junction of the small and large intestines lies the cecum. If we follow the main portion of the large intestine, we see the colon running from the point of junction with the small intestine to ultimately run posteriorly along the midline of the dorsal wall of the abdominal cavity. The bulbous objects visible here are fecal pellets contained within the rectum. They will ultimately be eliminated through the anus. While not part of the digestive system, we also see the spleen located within the abdominal cavity. Next, we will continue the incision that we made to expose the abdominal cavity. We will cut anteriorly to now expose the thoracic cavity. To do so, we will need to cut through the rib cage and body wall, staying one side of center. Now that we have exposed the thoracic cavity of the rat, we are going to explore the respiratory structures. Here we see the ventral view of the trachea. Remember that we saw the opening to the trachea, the glottis, in the view of the oral cavity. The trachea continues posteriorly to branch into bronchi, which enter the right and left lungs of the rat. At the base of the thoracic cavity, we can see the diaphragm. The diaphragm aids the ventilation of the lungs.